What does it mean to be born again? Welcome to Walking Through the Word for today, where we are in John chapter 3, and we started looking at the conversation between Jesus and Nicodemus yesterday. And we didn't get very far because, frankly, there's really a lot to unpack here. Jesus uses an interesting term when he says you must be born again. Now, we talked about one of the ways that Nicodemus was talking to Jesus about it, but there is another way that we can look at it, and that is the physical aspect of it. To see the idea of being born again as something physically happening, we recognize that that is impossible. That we can't do that. We cannot crawl back into our mother's womb. That's a very disturbing mental image that we get there. And Nicodemus is kind of trying to say that, but there's another thing about it. Basically, what Nicodemus is saying here is, Jesus, this is impossible to be born again. We can't do it. What do I need to do to get born again? And Jesus says very clearly that it's not anything that you can do. Don't marvel that I said to you, you must be born again, in verse 7. In verse 8, the wind blows where it wishes, and you hear its sound, but you do not know where it comes from or where it goes. So it is with everyone who is born of the Spirit. What? What in the world does that mean, Jesus? See, here's the thing about being born again. We have very little to do with it. In fact, we can't do it at all. It's impossible for us to rebirth ourselves. What happens if we try to rebirth ourselves? Nothing. We end up exactly back where we were, back what we've continued to do. It's the definition of insanity, doing this, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. When we try to renew ourselves, there's a significant problem with it, and that is ourselves. Our sin nature. We don't have the capacity to remove sin from ourselves. We don't have the capacity to be born again without help from the Spirit. The Spirit is mysterious, just like the wind. The wind can change direction at a moment's notice. It blows where it wishes, and it blows on whatever it wishes, and it directs whatever it wishes. This is the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit goes where the Holy Spirit wishes. He does what he does. The power can never be denied. The power is something that is immovable. Think about how wind controls things and how erosion and over time what wind can do and shape. When you look at the deserts and you see sand dunes that move and shift over the course of time, and it doesn't really take that long. If you leave things outside, it's going to get blown and battered about. Living in West Texas, it's a hard lesson sometimes to realize you leave something out. If the wind is strong enough and you walk outside, it may not be there when you come back. The Holy Spirit is the only thing powerful enough to allow us to be born again. The Holy Spirit is the only thing that can give us the power to do this. By placing our faith in Jesus Christ, the Holy Spirit allows us to be born again. This is what Jesus is telling Nicodemus. You can't make yourself be born again. You're right. You can't do this, but the Spirit of God can. The Spirit of God is what compels us. It's what tugs at us and pulls us to the place where we can decide to place our faith in Jesus. The Holy Spirit is the thing that calls us. The Holy Spirit is the thing that affects being born again. The Holy Spirit is relentless like the wind. The Holy Spirit is powerful like the wind. The Holy Spirit shapes and changes, moves and molds like the wind, except far more powerful and far more deep. Where the wind only affects physical things, the Holy Spirit affects the heart. And this is what Jesus is telling Nicodemus. You're right. You can't do this yourself, Nicodemus. This is something that must happen from God. And Nicodemus responds in verse 9, how can this happen then? If we can't do this on ourselves, how can we do it? And Jesus says, I want to tell you that if this is something that is beyond earthly things. This is something that is beyond human comprehension, beyond what people can do. This is only something that God can do. And he says, aren't you a teacher of Israel? You know the power of God. You teach the power of God every single day. You literally teach about the power of God through the history of your people in verse 10. And you don't understand these things? Do you not understand that some things are only possible by God? Some things are only possible through God. This is what it means to be born again.